Good Tvach. We're learning as a schutz for Shalema for Ilan Chaya Basarach. We're really on the top of Dalid Amid Beis. We're just going to try to bring you up to where we were. We wanted to say, we're trying to know, where do we know all the different avodas by Shinui Bailam? First, we covered Shinui Kaidish, where someone had a machshava of a different carbon. So we said that all those have to be lishma. And again, we're discussing, up to this point, we're just discussing the basic requirement that it should be lishma. We'll later get into the different niceties where most karbanis are going to be, they're kosher, but but now we're just regardless of what the consequences of your decision are, what will happen, the rule is that you have to do it lishma, and that's what we're talking about now. So we said all four avodas by legabi shinui kaidish, where a person changes changes which carbon. We said it has to be lishma. We had that from Psukim. Now we start to talk about shinui bailim. So we said we had Psukim Askron Zvicha. So we learned for Shchita, where do we know the rest of the avodas? So he said, let's learn it out from Shchita. So we said, we'll learn out. Let's learn out just like by Shchita you have it, so you'll have it by the other things. So let's pick up from there. 8 lines up on Dalet Amud Aleph. Let's learn out we said, even though we can't learn out from the Zvicha of Shina Bailam, because Zvicha, like we said, has its own chumrah, but let's learn out from Shina Kodesh. Since we see by Shina Kodesh all the avodas are the same, they all have to be done lishma. Let's say legabe Shina Bailam as well. All four of the avodas, not just shchita, have to be done lishma, l'shem the Bailam. So Gemara Ikal Mifrach. We could ask a kasha from Shina Kodesh. You can't necessarily learn out Shina Bailam from Shina Kodesh. The requirement that it has to be l'shem the Bailam from the requirement that it has to be l'shem which carbon. Ma'ala Shina Kodesh chen psula begufa. First of all, that when you say have a machshava of a oila when you're bringing a chatas, that's a machshava in the actual carbon itself. But when you have a machshava about the Bailam, that's not directly in the carbon, that's in the owner. In addition, also the din of Shini Kodesh applies when you have a machshava by Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, and Zrika. If you have that machshava, it's going to have the din of it was a Shini Kodesh. But Shini Bailam only applies for Zrika. Now, this is a little strange because we're talking now about let's learn out the din of Shini Bailam by all four avodas. What it means is if you do any one of the four avodas, and while you're doing it, you're thinking that the zrika is going to be l'shem a different bailam, because the whole crux of the kapara comes from the zrika. That's the final avoid, and that's what brings the kapara about. So when a person thinks I'm doing the shchita for a different bailam, it's not that important because that's not where the kapara is. But when he does the shchita and he's thinking that at the time of the shchita that he's going to do the zrika for the wrong bailam, that's a machshava shaloi l'shma in the shchita. So it's a little bit, we're having it both ways. On the one hand, we're saying that it's a kula in Shini Bailam, that it doesn't apply by all four avodas, but we also have to learn out that Shini Bailam will apply in all four avodas, in the sense that if you have a machshava zrika shaloi l'shem bailam in any avoda, even while he's doing the shchita or the kabbalah or the halacha, that's going to pass it. Okay, we're going to leave. We're not going to come back to this for a while, but I just don't want to leave anyone with the wrong impression about this. Another one. We're going to see a lot of this. That Shini Kodesh, if he has a machshava of a different carbon, That can even be where the owner died, and now the Yarshim are bringing it. If they have machshav a different carbon, that's applicable. But there's no such thing as shine bailim la'achamisa because the bailim are no longer there; they're already dead. It's going to be a lot of detail about who is the owner of a carbon when the Yarshim are bringing it, and what their yachas to that carbon is. But the person who's being miskaper with the carbon is clearly no longer there. So v'yashne b'tzibur k'v'yachet. In addition, you have Shinu Kaidish can be by any kind of carbon, but Shinu Bailam is irrelevant by carbon tzibur. There's no single Bailam. If you say I had in mind Reuven instead of Shimon, the carbon tzibur is for everyone. So we have 4 reasons why you can't learn out Shinu Bailim, the din of that you need Lishma by Shinu Bailim, from the din that you need Lishma by Shinu Kaidish. Even though 2 of these reasons we can quibble with, tarta miya dafka, 2 of them are going to stay. And the Gemara is going to say why. First of all, we try to say that one of the strengths of Shina Lishma is that Shina Bailam is not a psul begufa, it's about who the owner is. Machshava ba'alma. Shini Kodesh Nabi Machshava Amhu. We're not talking about a psul in the owner. We're talking about a machshava in the carbon. So whether the machshava is about what the machshava is about doesn't make it not a psul begufa. If you have a mum in the animal, that's a psul begufa. If the owner has a psul of some other kind, he's tamei, that's not a psul begufa. But over here we're talking about the machshava of who the owner is as opposed to who the carbon is. Both of them are either a psul begufa or not, but both of them are a machshava. It doesn't make a difference what the machshava is about. That should not take it out of being a psul begufa. So that's not really a good chumrah of shinu kaidos over shinu bailam. Elo kivin achshav pasla hanami kivin achshav pasla. Both of them, it's going to be a machshava. It's going to pass. Well, the Pinchas, secondly, so that's the first. So we knocked off the psula begufay. Well, the Pinchas breder of Mari, the Amar yeshin ba'an lachamisa. You also have another thing that according to Rav Pinchas breder of Mari, he says you can't have a shinu ba'alam lachamisa. It's not true what you're saying that once it was yarshin, there's no longer possible to have a machshava shinu ba'alam. He says it is possible. So that's the second thing, that there's no chilik between the Shema and Shaloi l'shem Bailim and l'shem Kaidish. So batarti miya ikal mifrach. But we still have two reasons, 2 problems that make it that we can't learn out Shini Bailim from Shini Kaidish. So Elam Ravashi Yamakrov and Nirtzal Echapalov V'lo Yal Chavere. Torah says legabe bringing, I think this is lechatas, that he has to bring it. As the nitzel lechapalav v'lo chaver benan mischaver. So it says, "Frek the Gemara v'halu hachid yosa hamivay lechadetanya v'nirtzal lechapalav Reb Shimon oimer esha olav chayav achu yusay esha ene olav ene chayav achu yusay." He learns it to teach the din of the difference between a carbon neder and a nedava. Something that he was makabel and he said harei alai, then it's chayiv b'achur yusuf. If something happens to the carbon, he accepted on himself the responsibility of bringing the carbon. That's a neder. So regardless of what happens to the carbon, he has to bring it. But if he says harei zu, which is a nedava, then he's ein chayiv b'achur yusuf. So that's what the Torah is telling you. That it's only esha olav. It's only if it's olav that he's chayiv b'achur yusuf. But if not, he's not. V'amar Yitzchak bar Avdim, in my time, even the Amar Olai, since he said v'nitz olav l'chaper olav, command the ton le'akaf seidami. Since he said harei olai, that makes it as if he took upon himself the responsibility. So that's what he used that pasuk for. So again, where are we learning the other avodas that if they're done with a shinui bailim, they're not going to be, that you have to do it with a shinui, with the correct bailim in mind, that you're not allowed to do it with a shinu bailim. So Gemara, Rav Ashi mi v'nirtza loy l'chaper olav. He's not coming from the whole totality of the pasuk. He's coming from the extra word loy. V'nirtza loy, that he has to do it b'davka, having in mind l'shem this particular this person. So v'nirtza loy. So if he doesn't have in mind l'shem the correct bailim, it's not going to be mechaper. So this is on zrika. This is talking about zrika. So we've learned out, in addition to shchita, we learned out earlier. So when you have zrika by shinu bailim, also has to be l'shem the bailim. Practic Gemara Ashkan zvicha zrika. So we learned out two of the avodas have to be l'shem the bailim. Kabbalah midalin. What about Kabbalah? And I'm going to tell you, the Gemara is never going to tell you about halacha, because we learned before that the pasuk of halacha was said in the lashon of Kabbalah. It says v'hikrivu, which is really a lashon of halacha, but we use it for Kabbalah. It's proven that it must be Kabbalah. So therefore, we say the two of them go together. So then that's going to be the same with this Gemara also. Kabbalah and halacha eventually are going to go together. So for the Gemara, Kabbalah minan v'chitem aleil from zvicha zrika. Let's say learn it out from the other two avodas. If someone does the shchita or they do the zrika outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be chayiv for doing avodah b'chutz. But that's not the case. Kabbalah halacha. There's no pasuk to tell you a lav and doing a b'chutz. So that's a chumrah. So you can't learn it out. Alam Rav Ashi ashi mi ayil nazir. We learn it out from the ayil nazir. T'chsev. This is the ayil that's brought when a nazir is finished his terms of Naziris. He has to bring 3 karbanos. A ayil as a shlomim, and he has to bring a oila and a chatos. So it says, ayil yaseh zevach shlomim. It says it should be a zevach shlomim. Now this word zevach is always problematic. Why do you say zevach shlomim? So we say, yaseh tells you, shetei asiyaseh l'shem shlomim. That he should do it, bedavka l'shem shlomim. Now, what do we need a pasuk to tell you that you have to do a shlomim l'shem shlomim? Many in l'shini kaidish, the nafkalei behas. And we already learned out shini kaidish from zevach shlomim before. Today we're in l'shini bailim, so we have an extra for shini bailim, and we'll come to tell you the Kabbalah has to be l'shem bailim. Amli avacha baraba l'rava emi yasa, and yasa is a mashmais of all the avodas. So it would include Kabbalah and halacha. Amalei Ravacha Barav L'Rava Emi Yasa Klal Zevach Prat Klal Prat Ein Bechlal Lamasha B'Prat Zvicha In Midiachin Aloi. Let's say that you have a limitation, even though you have a lima to tell you that Shinu Bailam should be allowed, but the Torah said it in the form of a Klal Prat. First, it said Yasa Im Yasa, which is a Klal, and then it says Zevach Shlom. Zevach is a reference to Shchita. So Klal Uprat Ein B'Chlal Meshav Prat Zvicha In Midiachin Aloi. So be limited. We'd say that no, this is only telling you Zvicha, even though we already know that. So Gemara Iksev Yasa Shlom Zevach Kedkam. If it would say Yasa Zevach Shlom, then it would be true. Then the Zevach would be a Prat after the Klal. Hashadachsev Yasa Zevach Shlomim have a klal she'ena mole. Since the Zevach and Shlomim, Yasa is Zevach Shlomim. Shlomim is what Yasa is doing. You're saying Yasa is Shlomim, and then you're saying Zevach. You're trying to say Zevach is the prat. The prat has to be at the end. You can't have a prat before the completion of the klal, and the klal is the Zevach Yasa Shlomim. So Hashadachsev. So therefore it would be left that you could learn out from here Yasa as all the Kabbanis. There's no Klal Prat to limit it to just Shchita. Ravina Amar Lo'ilam Danan. No, you can be done a Klal Prat She'ena Male. In spite of the fact that you have an intervening word, you can still learn it as a Prat that is limiting. But it says Lashem. After it says Zevach Shlomim, it says Yasa Zevach Shlomim, it says Lashem. Chazav Klal. So it's a Klal Prat to Klal. So then we say Ke'ena Prat. It doesn't have to be Elamash of a Prat, but keep Ke'ena Prat similar to the Prat. And the Prat is Zivicha, but it can include everything else. Amalei Ravacha midifti levina v'halei dami kolakama l'kolabasra. How could you compare the two klalos? Kolakama ma'basiyas v'suloi. The first klal of Zevach Yasez Zevach Shlomim, that's saying anything, any of the avodas, anything that you do with the carbon. Kolabasa Kol Hashem, anything that's Hashem. Afilu Shvicha Shirayim Bataras Emurim. It's not Yaseh, the things that you do. It's any part of it, even that it doesn't, anything that's for Hashem. So that will include other things. And there's no din that Shvicha Shirayim and Haktaras Emurim have to be L'Shem Bailim. So Gemara, I tell the Bishmal, but klal uprati darish ki I gavna. Klal upratu klal. Yata elken prat. We're going according to Rabbi Shmuel. He says by a klal uprat, you are darish like that. You are darish. Klal upratu klal yata dan elken prat. Ma prat mafurish avoida beinin l'shmon. Av kol avoida beinin l'shmon. Ma prat mafurish avoida b'chayven aleh b'chutz. Kol avoida b'chayven aleh b'chutz. No, I'm sorry. Now there is a kasha. We're going to be Shmuel who's dashing like this. Now, fact the Gemara. So going according to Rabbi Shmuel who says so we don't care that the fact that it's a klal she'enam a prat she'enam al. So what do we say? Klal prat to klal. Yeto dan ekana prat. Ma prat mufurish avoida or be'inan l'shmon. Av kol avoida be'inan l'shmon. So we have a proof for all the four avodas. Not just Zvicha and not just Shchita and Zrika, but even Kabbalah and Hailach. Fact the Gemara, Ima problem for Shavayim Chayvon LeBechutz, Avkal Avayim Chayvon LeBechutz, Shchita, Zrika, in Kabbalah Hailach Aloi. Why don't we say it's only those things that are Mefurish, which is Zvicha? It's talking about Shechting, that Yechai, and we said before, Zvicha and Shchita both have, and Zrika both have a chumrah that they are chayiv if you do a b'chutz. So let's say that this prat, it's only ke'ena prat. So ke'ena prat will limit it to just shchita and zrika, not kabbalah and halacha. So where it says on the other hand, let's say this: inami ma prat mefush davar aton sofun v'yeshna b'chatois pnimius. It's only something that the shchita has to be in the north of the Chatzar. You have shchita even by the Chatoyis that there's no zrika on the outside mizbeach. It's only brought to the inside mizbeach, which is what we call zrika on the outside mizbeach. So it's not found. So shchita is found by the Chatoyis apnius, but zrika is not. Av kol aton sofim yeshem chatzar apnius. Shchita v'kabbalah in zrika loy. So that would tell us Kabbalah and Halacha as opposed to Zrika. Then Zrika wouldn't be learned out. So Gemara says, you're trying to say it's a problem. No, since we don't have a resolution of which way to learn the prat and the klal uprat to klal, or the klal uprat, so we're going to leave it that you learn both of them. Iba Yisema, Zrika midravashi nafka. I'm sorry, I left that one. The second lashon, this is just another way of saying the same thing that we said before. Since we have one way of learning out the klal prat that will include Kabbalah and Halacha, and one way that will include Zrika, so we leave it as learning both. One and one, leave it in its place. And the third pshat, Ibai same as Zrika midravashi nafka. If we have a question of what the klal prat is referring to, we already learned out Zrika from Ravashi, from the pasuk. So we don't need to learn out Zrika. So therefore, obviously, the klal prat is coming to include something new. It's coming to include Kabbalah and Halacha. Track the Gemara. Ashkanayil Nazir. Now the Gemara makes a big problem. So we went to all this effort, which, to find out where do we see that there's Vin Lishma on Shinu Bailam for the Avodas, that you can't be Mishana the Bailam on the avoida of a carbon. And we brought from the pasuk by Ayil Nazir, right? It says by Ayil Nazir, and I'm sorry, where was it? It's Ayil Yaseh Zevach Shlomim. So, but the Gemara says, okay, so then all we know is that by an Ayil Shlomim you need Shinu Bailam, that you need the Bailam to be correct. How do we know on other kabbanas? Ayal Nazir, Shar Shlomim Minol. And how do we know a different carbon Shlomim? V'chitei Menel from Ayal Nazir, if you'll say, learn that from Ayal Nazir, Mal Ayal Nazir, Chen Yeshimon Dam Macher. You could say Ayal Nazir is different because in addition to the Shlomim, there's also an oil and a chatas that the Nazir brings. So maybe that's why it has to be l'shem the bailam. So imkein nichtev shalmi my shlomim l'rabis kol shlomim. It should have said, or they changed it to shlomov. So they have it shlomim. My shlomim lashon rabim. It's coming to say all shlomim have that in. So ashkan shlomim shar kol kosher. So we learned ayal nazar. We have all shlomim that are ayal nazar is a shlom and all shlomim. What about other karbonis? If you say let's never shlom mashum chen to unin smicha. Shlom has a chumrah that it needs that you have to push your hands down in it. Unesachim, you pour out the wine and you bring a mincha with it. Or tunufas chaz v'shaik, you wave the chaz and the shaik, which other kabbanis don't have. Elam akros zeis ha'toyr l'oil l'mincha l'chatas l'ashem l'amilul m'zevach ha'shlam. I don't know. When you do this, you remember this from Kokeli, right? So it compares all the karbanos together. One of them is shlamim. Hekeshen hakasav l'shlamim. So the Torah is comparing them all to shlamim. Ma shlamim ben shi nekodesh ben shi laban be'inin l'shma. I've called ben shi nekodesh ben shi nebaylim be'inin l'shma. We learn out from shlamim to all the other karbanos. So Gemara ema heichad shachadu shaloi l'shma lifsulu. Let's say. So now the Gemara is moving on to, until now we've been discussing the basic rule that you have to do your carbon, both l'shem the proper carbon and l'shem the proper bilam, who the bilam is and what carbon it is. Now the Gemara is getting back to what we said in our Mishnah. It's not as simple as that the Torah says to do it. Now we're talking about what the consequences of when you mess it up. And we said in our Mishnah, all the karbanis, if you do it shaloi l'shma, it's kosher, but alu l'baylam shem chayva, except for chatas and pesach that are going to be pasal legamri. So now the Gemara says, why are we saying that it's kosher, but alu l'baylam shem chayva? Let's say the Torah said you have to do it l'shma, so let's say that it becomes pasal, and it's entirely pasal. If you're in the middle of bringing a carbon, you shechted it shaloi l'shma or shaloi l'shem baylam, that you don't continue with the carbon because you ruined it. So we had this back on Daf Beis Amid Beis. The Torah says you should do what your lips said. You should do like you were menader, and then the pasuk continues, and it says nedava. The Torah changes it to a nedava. He says. The Gemara asks, "Hi nedavar nedahu, elam kamasha nedava sisi yein nedavim lav yein nedava." What the Torah is telling you is, if you do as you originally had promised, if you have in mind what you had in mind from the beginning, you said I'm bringing a chatas, and you have in mind to be a chatas, then your neder is a neder. I mean, a chatas is not a good example. I mean, a shlomim. I promised to bring a shlomim, and then you have in mind a shlomim, then it's good. But if you in lav, if you don't have in mind that it should be a shlomim, instead you change it to be a b'chayr, then it's a nedava. It's no longer what you had originally made a neder for. Now it's a new nedava, not what you had promised it for, and you're not going to be yaitza. It's not going to be l'baylam shem chayva, but you could still bring it. The Gemara says we already said before. We said that we learn all karbanis from shlamim, that you have to be lishma, and we're saying motzei sasecha. So why do we need both of these things? Dikas of Rachmana, motzei sasecha tishmar havamina lo yada b'mai kas of Rachmana lo yada b'mai. I wouldn't know what this is referring to. It means the Torah says, motzei sasecha tishmar, you have to do as what you said, but what part of what you said do you have to be careful of? It's not bedafka talking about lishma. Torah says you have to watch what you said. What does that mean? Kasar Rachmana zeis ha'Torah. That's why the Torah says zeis ha'Torah, that where it says that what you said has to be lishma. That means the Torah says, what is the pasuk? Zeis ha'Torah la'olam minchal chatzal asham l'shalom zevach hashlam. So they're all compared to Shlomim. And we said by a Shlomim being in Lishma. So we learn out. So this comes to tell you that what we're discussing over here is talking about Lishma. And vice versa. I would think it comes to passel altogether, not just to make it that it's not Alul Ba'am Shem Chayva. Because so Motzei Secha tells you the din that it's just not going to be Alul Ba'am Shem Chayva, but it will remain kosher. Okay, now a slightly different topic. Rami Reish Lakish al Mu'ed Bei Midrasha. Reish Lakish asks a question as he's reclining on his stomach in the base medrash. That's what Rashi says. Umakshi asked the question, and this is really just sort of going over the same territory that we just covered, and he's just going to ask it. He doesn't really have this limud. Reish Lakish was not aware of this limud of Motzei Vasecha, so he asked, "Im ksher mehem yiratzu v'mei meratzim lama boyin." Says Manavshach. If the carbon is kosher, it should be meratza the bailam, and if it's not going to be a kapara for the bailam, lama boyin, then it shouldn't be possible. You shouldn't be able to continue bringing the carbon. It says one way or the other. Amalei Rebbe Eliezer. It's not Rebbe Eliezer, it's Rebbe Lazar, because this is Rebbe Eliezer the Tana. This is a Meir Rebbe Lazar. He said, why is it such a strange thing to you that you're saying that it could be kosher, but it's not Alul Ba'am Shem Chayva? It is, maybe that's what happens when someone brings a Shlomim, Shaloi L'Shma, just like if the Bailam died, the carbon is still brought, even though the Bailam are no longer there to get the ritzui, to get the benefit, the schus of having brought the carbon, because they're already, once you're dead, it's too late to bring a carbon. You already get the kapara for whatever you did when you die. So, but nevertheless, you bring the carbon. So we see that such a thing. So why can't it be the same thing over here? The Tanan. A woman who was a yeledes, she has to bring a oila and a chatas, and she already brought her chatas, and then she died. Yaviu yarshin oilasa. Her yarshin bring the oila, because we know, as we saw before, a chatas shemesu ba'aleh is lemisa azla. You can't do anything with it, but a oila is no such din, so they could still bring the oila. Oilasu mesa. If she brought her oila, lo yaviu yarshin chatas. She can't bring the chatas because, like we said, chatas shemesu ba'aleh isn't lemisa, but the oila, the Mishnah said you could bring. So you see that there is such a concept. It's not being meratza for the dead mother. She's not around to get a ritzui, and even so you bring it. So you see there's such a thing as a kosher carbon that's not meratza. You only brought a raya legabi and oila. Asham d'liyasa la'achamisa minal. Chatas, I agree with you. It's not a, but because of chatas anyway, it's takanat. It's not kosher. But what about an asham? An asham l'chayra. The Tanakama of our Mishnah said you do bring an asham. It's not possible. It's just layal l'ba'am shem chayva, and you don't bring it la'achamisa. It has the same thing as a chatas that an asham la'achamisa is not brought. Amalei armachaysa b'tzidai. Rebbe Eliezer ma'afa asham. So he said back to him, "What are you asking kasha for? What this is?" According to Rebbe Eliezer in the Mishnah, he says taka you can't bring an asham. An asham has the same thing as a chatas. Maybe that's the reason why, because it's not able to be brought la'achamisa. There's no such thing as a asham that's kosher v'loyal ba'am l'shem chayva. Amar zeu sha'imel avadim gadolhu. So Reish Lakish said to Rebbe Elazar, people say you're a great man, that you know how to learn. Kamina ana Mishnah shleima v'atamli Rebbe Eliezer. I said the Mishnah, I want an explanation of both the Tanakama and Rebbe Eliezer. And you're saying that I could answer it according to Rebbe Eliezer. What about the Tanakama? I'm going to answer the question myself. Hitaka learns from the pasuk of, he brings now the pasuk of Motzei V'Secha Tishmar, that tells you that if you bring it properly l'shma, then it's going to be Alul Ba'am Shem Chayva. But if not, it's going to be an adava, which is not Alul Ba'am L'Shem Chayva. So you see from the pasuk there's such a concept, in spite of the fact that we don't see it by Emes, But the Torah tells you from Motzei Shasecha that there is such a thing of Pasol Le'ol L'Bayim L'Shem Chayil. Yosef Rav Zera Rav Yitzchak Bar Abba v'Yosef Abaye Gabaye. Abaye was sitting in front of Rav Zera Rav Yitzchak Bar Abba. V'Yasef V'Ka'amri Kasha Leila Reish Lakish Osam Le'ach Salach HaMisha V'Nosel La Talmuda Motzei Shasecha. They asked this kash. They just repeated what we had just said. That they asked the question, what about the asham? Asham is going to be a problem because we don't find a possibility of an asham that's kosher, but like Allah ba'alim l'shem chayva. And he said, no, we learn it out from Motzei Shasecha. Ema habab b'neder v'nedava laisi v'loy litzi asham loy laisi klal. He said, why don't we learn out? Since the pasuk of Motzei Shasecha is talking about a neder and a dava, maybe it only applies to karbanos that are similar to it, that have a neder and a dava. But asham, well, we don't have that. We should have the general rule that once something is pasul, it's pasul agamri. It's not only like shem chayva, but it's also you have to stop it in its tracks. It's not a kosher carbon. So let's limit the pasuk of Motzei Shasecha to its case of a nedar and a davas, and asham is not a neder and a dava. Asham is something similar to a chatas that you mechayev to for specific averis. Amlo Abaya Reish Lakish mehacha pasach. This is where Reish Lakish got this from. This is why Reish Lakish did not have a problem with this, because he was the one who answered on himself. V'shachar oisel chatas oisel l'shmok sheira shalei l'shmok psula. The Torah says legabi the chatas. This is what we're going to see later on. We said in the Mishnah that a chatas is in ganzen pasul. It's not just like all l'bayim shem chayva, but it's a pasul of carbon. And we learned that because the Torah says v'shachat oisel l'chatas. You shecht it as a chatas. Oisel l'shmok sheira shalei l'shmok psula. Hashar kochim shalei l'shmok sherin. By a chatas, if it's l'shma, it's kosher. If it's shalei l'shma, it's in ganzen pasul. But other karbanos we learn out as a diak. Other karbanos, if you do it shalai l'shma, it's still kosher. It's just like a little by l'shem chayva. Zak Gemara yachol yirtzu. If you're learning out from there, let's say not just our other karbanos, non-chatayis, which we're learning out from the diak from chatas, maybe they should not just be kosher, but also should be provide a ritzu for the bailam. That's what Motzei Shasecha tells you. Vasisa kasha nedarta. If I'm lav yehein dava, that it's not going to provide a ritzu, it's not going to be considered if you brought for your neder. You still have to bring another one for your neder. Let's say again, this is limited to only those things that are Motzei Shasecha, which is a neder and a dava. But something that's not a neder and dava, like an asham, we'll say the other way around. We're saying the pasuk says we learn out from chatas that this is pasul, but everything else is kosher. We said Motzei Shasecha told you that it's not meratza, but asham that's not included in Motzei Shasecha, but it's not a neder and dava. But now we're going in the other direction. Asham should be in ganzen kosher, unlike other non-chatas karbanos. Marabaya, asham de mirtzi lematzas amri. You can't say asham should be meratz and ganzen. Kal v'chaim me'ayla, because we learned that from kal v'chaim from ayla. We learned all other karbanos, including ayla. Ayla is merat. It's not meratza. Uma ayla she'enim makap heres. Ein meratza asham shemechaper ein din she ein meratza. And ayla is not brought as a kapara. It can be brought as a carbon stamazai, as a nedava. Asham that is mechaper, certainly it's not going to be meratza. So the Mala Ayla shechein kol shlom. No, he said no. Maybe Ayla taka is not meratza because it's entirely burned, so it has a chumra of asham which is not entirely burned. So Shlom Yechichu. Shlom is not kulei kol. So let's prove from Shlom. Mala Shlom is chein to unisachem to nuchadza b'shoik. Like we said before, Shlom has its own chumras, and that's the reason maybe why it's not meratza, but maybe asham is meratza. Ayla techiach. So you look between Oyla and Shlomim, Shehein Kachim, that they're Kachim, V'shachtam Shalal Shmon Ksherim, Ve'im Meratzim, both of them have it in that the apostle and they're not meratza. Avani evi asham shu kodesh b'shach shleishman kosher ve'ein meratza. So Gemara, Malat Shabbos v'enchen yeshne b'tzibur. Oila is brought b'tzibur all the time, right? Every musaf on Yom Tov there's oilas, right? We say that in the middle of the musaf. We say what karbanos you bring, and some of them are oilas. And you also bring the Talmud every day as an oila. And shlamim is the Rashi says kifsei atzeres, the two kvasim of shlamim that you bring on Shavuos, are karbanos tzibur. So Zok Gemara, Toida Seichich. Let's bring a right from Toida that you bring when you have to give praise. So Zok Gemara, Mal Toida Shechein Tunos Lechem. No, Toida has its own chumrah that you have to bring lechem along with it, which you don't have by an asham. So Gemara, Oilu Shlam Echichu. Oilam Shlamim, they don't have lechem, and even so, they also are not meratza. Because of the Lori Zechariah, Lori Zechariah, such as Shein Kachim, Shachim Shalishman Kachim, Any Meratza, Avani Evi Asham, Shu Kodesh, Shachim Shalishman Kachim, Any Meratza. So the Gemara Tzad Shava Shebehen. What's the Tzad Shava of Oila, Shlamim, and Toida? Shein Boim Beneder Benedava. They all brought by a person saying, "I'm bringing it." Masha Ein Keina Asham, a person is required to bring, and that's what the pasuk referred to. Motzei Sesecha said, "Neder Nedava." Ela Marava, Zois HaTorah, where we said all the different karbanos, La'asham, La'shlamim, V'la'miluim, Kisha Kasa L'shlamim, Ma'ashlam, Shen Kachem, V'shachna Shalom, L'shmon Ksherim, V'emeratzim, Avni Evi Asham, Shu Kodesh. We learn out from a Hekesh, not from a Kal V'chaimer, Ein Meshivan Ala Hekesh, so there's nothing to ask on it. Practically, Ma'achaz, the actual Shlamim, Akish L'chatas. It's also included in that pasuk chatas, and chatas is not meratza. It's not meratza, and it's puzzle. So why are we makish asham to shlamim, which is kosher and not meratza? Let's be makish to chatas, which is puzzle and gansin. It's like Gemara mi'at rachmana oisa. That can't be. The Torah said chatas, only chatas is puzzle, but nothing else. I mean, Pesach is an exception, but that's so that we wouldn't include naturally asham. Okay, we'll stop over here. Be'ezus Hashem, thank you for your patience.